Going into this semester, I had relatively little experience writing within a literary context, even though I had written a lot of scientific study reports as I'm a STEM major. I think the area I was least nimble in my written word was rhetoric, and the area I was most capable was probably critical thinking from reading so much data. This meant the focus on rhetoric within our assignments was very beneficial and helped me progress as a writer as well as a debater. The first assignment, self-introduction, forced me out of my shell, so I had to immediately show the rawest form of myself whenever I wrote. This is something I will probably use throughout any writing I might do going forward. The rhetorical analysis activity helped introduce me to rhetoric as more than just a definition, but to understand the application of it as well. This helped my rhetorical knowledge as well as my flexibility in that I can use rhetoric more effectively to state my case. All the blog assignments increased my level of engagement and metacognition throughout the learning process of learning rhetoric through the graphic guide novel. The book itself taught me a lot of rhetorical knowledge, knowledge of conventions, as well as increased my compositional ability. It taught me when, how, and why to use different forms of rhetoric, which will be very useful for all types of writing, as well as any debate I might find myself in the future. The graphic memoir activity pulled me further out of my emotional shell, which increased my engagement as well as my openness as I saw the memoir of my peers and got more context for why they might say what they say. The text purpose activity increased my ability to recognize rhetoric as well as showed me some creativity and rhetorical deliverance. This also taught me more flexibility within a group context as it was done within a group context. The dialectical journal increased my metacognition greatly, as well as increased my rhetorical knowledge and critical thinking. It did this through making me look for rhetoric within a documentary, which is a medium I watch somewhat frequently. This will help me recognize rhetoric within movies and other visual mediums. The coupled microtheme response 1 helped further cement my ability to recognize rhetoric as well as helped my writing ability and persistence as it made me go back on homework I had already done. The text and action activity was similar to the dialectical journal in that it increased my rhetorical knowledge and critical thinking by making me observe rhetoric within visual medium in the show BoJack Horseman. This was much more fun though because I got to go pretty far into detail about one of my favorite shows of all time. Having this activity be our own choice of subject greatly increased my engagement because I enjoyed what I was researching. It also increased my persistence and responsibility for that same reason. This also increased my creativity as it was on my mind more often than I was so everything I wrote had significantly more thought put into it, and since the paper wasn't that long, I had to concisely and accurately state my case without explanation. I think going forward that this paper helped me the most out of all I did this year. The micro theme too made me go more in depth about my past and honestly kind of felt a little too personal. Maybe that's simply due to my past being what it is and my condition as being towards wearing my emotions on my sleeve. But in order to explain why I act and write the way I do, I had to give context to my background. I enjoyed getting it out there, but I don't enjoy having everyone know what has happened because I'd rather be who I am now than be what happened to me in my past. Going forward, this increased my creativity because I didn't want to be too blunt. The annotated sources greatly increased my flexibility as it was the first time I had ever annotated anything, and it was an easy way to learn how to. This, for that reason, increased my ability to compose as I learned how to compose something I hadn't ever composed. Going forward, this will probably help me greatly because I'll probably need to annotate more in the future. The field research results was my first venture into getting data from my peers and as such helped my flexibility as well as my curiosity and openness. This is something I'll likely have to do going into the future as the more minds, the better the product when engineering something. This also helped my critical thinking in figuring out how to collect and understand data. This also helped my writing process in showing me how to gain more information. The research paper helped my openness as I gained knowledge from a lot of different sources. This also increased my engagement as it took a lot of work to make the paper. This increased my persistence as I had to go back on this paper multiple times as it was much too long to do in one sitting. That persistence also increased my responsibility as I had to be responsible enough to go through that long of a paper multiple times. The paper also increased my flexibility as it was the first time I had written a paper that long. The paper increased my metacognition as well as I had to think through how to write a paper that long. This increased my creative writing ability, critical thinking, knowledge of conventions, and ability to compose, as I had to learn to apply all of those, the writing ability, critical thinking, and knowledge of conventions, to that long of a paper. This made me a better writer. The recast made me how to critically think to be able to effectively recast my paper. It increased my creativity in order to recast the paper into a video, as well as how to show my paper through what is essentially a slideshow, and how to accent that video with spoken explanations. The recast also increased my openness as I had a lot to consider when figuring out how I wanted to recast the paper. The recast presentation gave me an easy time giving a presentation for the first time in a long time in front of an audience. This pulled me out of my shell and helped me develop as a student.